We have a quorum. It's past the appointed time. I thank members for coming to the meeting today. Members, please note that since the 21st of April, the panel has received 4 information papers, and these are listed in the agenda. Items for discussion at the next meeting. Members, please refer to our papers. The next meeting will discuss 3 items as proposed by the administration: 1, public transport strategy study; 2, proposed retention of 3 supernumerary posts for the Hong Kong-Macau-Zhuhai Bridge Management Office, and also internal deployment of 1 permanent post. Number 3, strategic studies on railways and major roads beyond 2030. Members, any particular views on these 3 items? If not, we can go into item 3. Proposal for setting up a subcommittee on hillside escalator links and elevator systems under the panel. On the 21st of April, at the meeting here, I proposed to set up that subcommittee. The proposed terms of reference, proposed work plan, and the proposed timetable have been distributed to members. Members, any particular views on the setting up of that subcommittee, please? If not, I'd like to remind members that policy-related subcommittees have to queue up at the House Committee. There are already 10 such subcommittees that have been set up, and we have to stand in the queue. And also, there are 7 in front of us, so we'll stand there in the queue. For the time being, the subcommittee will not be set up for now, but we'll stand in the queue. If there are no other questions, we'll go into the next item, and I will invite the administration team to come in. And that is proposed revision to fees and charges relating to road traffic, batch 3. The administration, if you are ready, Mr. Yao, the Undersecretary, please introduce the paper, please. Chairman, in line with the user pays principle, is the government's policy that government fees and charges should in general be set at a level sufficient to recover the full cost of providing the relevant services. In the 2013-14 budget speech, the Financial Secretary indicated that we needed a systematic review of government fees and charges, and should first deal with fees that had not been revised for years and did not directly affect people's livelihood. Thereafter, departments should review the fee levels annually and revise the fees where necessary. According to our calculation of cost, we now propose to revise 13 fees and charges relating to the road traffic ordinance and also the government charges under its subsidiary legislation, so that gradually we can achieve full cost recovery. And the fees and charges proposed are 4 fee items that have not been revised since 2005 and 9 items that have a relatively low cost recovery rate after regular fee reviews. We also propose to make certain technical amendments to delete 3 items which do not apply to Hong Kong anymore because of the non-application of international conventions. These will not have any impact on livelihood. The relevant departments will continue to streamline the procedures and enhance efficiency in order to control costs. We are all ears to members' views on this revision exercise, and we hope members will support the exercise, and we will start the legislative work later, and we hope to submit the required legislative amendments to LegCo within 2017-18. Thank you. Members, it's time for questions and answers. Since we have 3 items on the agenda, and we will come to the parking issue, which is our concern. Therefore, I will control the time tightly. There will just be 1 round of questions, 3 minutes each, including a reply. I will now read out the order. Jeremy Tam, Ronick Chan, and Michael Look. Any more? If not, Jeremy Tam. Thank you, Chairman. A brief one. In the annex, you say, you tell us the changes, but you don't seem to have told us whether these permits are just one-off or that they have to be renewed every year. Maybe you cannot give me all the answers today because I can see some permits are one-off or some that have to be renewed every year. I don't know very clearly. Can you let me know whether my understanding is correct? Is it that some of the permits are just issued and it's just like that, or others have to renew it on a yearly basis? Because I want to gauge the actual impact. Can I defer to the Transport Department? TD? Yes, Chairman. These 13 fees and charges are such that when you apply for a permit or license, you have to pay the fee, and usually there is a validity period for these permits. Most of them are valid for 1 year. Thank you. I understand. No more questions. Mr. Ronick Chan. Thank you, Chairman. And also a very brief one. The fourth revision. Advertising vehicle permit. The present fee is $110, meaning 12.6%. And after revision, it will take up only 17.8% of the cost.
Compared to other fees, they are 30%, 40%, sometimes going up to 90%. Now, I can understand the proposed revision, but at the end, what you want is actually full recovery of costs, which means that there will be, at some point, a very big revision upwards. And I'm thinking, because it is but $110, the base figure is low, why don't you then revise it to 30% or 40% of cost recovery this time? So in the future, the increase would not be so staggering. It's not so high. So it may actually be 200% or 300% sometime in the future for the revised fee as a percentage. So why don't you revise upwards the cost recovery rate for this time? Well, Mr. Yao, Mr. Chair, in the paper, paragraph 4, we have referred to this particular principle in proposing the fee increase. And in the past, for revision efforts, we have come across exactly the kind of view that we heard just now, and we will think about that view, and we will go back and look at it. In the amended proposal, we will go through whether we indeed need to revise this upwards. LAU Kwok-fan, your turn. None. All right. Any other members? If there are none, then we will close the discussion here for this agenda item. Thank you very much. Our next item is the government's takeover of Tate Khan's tunnel. First of all, I would like to ask the government to bring us through the paper. If you have any questions, would you please raise your hand? Because today we cannot use the electronic voting system, and if you have any need to leave the room, would you please go back to the seat that you had occupied? Because the Secretariat will have to note your seat in order to be able to take down the votes manually. We thank the government for coming to the meeting. And the next is the takeover arrangements of the Tate Khan tunnel. Mr. Chair, I would like to very briefly go through the 2018 July expiry of the Tate Khan Tunnel franchise and what the government's takeover proposal is for that. Now, the TCT, the Tate Khan Tunnel, is, as you know, the third build, operate, transfer, that is BOT tunnel. The government in 1998 had awarded a 30-year BOT franchise to Tate Khan Tunnel Company Limited. And during that time, the company was to build, operate, and transfer the said tunnel. And as the franchise expires in August of 2016, similar to the arrangements for takeover the East Harbour crossing, the government's takeover of TCT will be a technical exercise involving a change of tunnel ownership. And there will be no major change to the actual tunnel operation, toll levels and regulations, etc. Those will not be affected. They will not have any major difference before and after the government's takeover of TCT, much like the Eastern Tunnel. And also for 2017, we are preparing the Roads Tunnels Government Amendment Bill 2017 for this purpose and target to introduce the amendment bill into the LegCo as soon as practicable. And we will submit it under the legal framework of Road Tunnels Government Ordinance Cap 368 and its subsidiary legislation. And we also want to amend the Roads Tunnel Government regulations, including the existing tolls chargeable and also the providing for an exemption from prohibition against vehicles conveying dangerous goods in TCT and other government tunnels under emergency situations, and also provide for necessary passage of vehicles such as medical, etc. vehicles. And according to the practice, the CTC, after it's been taken over by the government, there will be an operator which will be responsible for the operation of the tunnel, and also there will be a public tendering exercise. At the end of the year, there will be a tendering out of the management of the tunnel. Now, before the for the smooth operation of the tunnel, we would want the contractor for the management of the tunnel to continue with taking over the skills and the personnel of the existing company, and that would be over 80% of the total staff. And we would want the new operator to take over as a priority the existing staff of the company, so that the new company will have the necessary staff and also the capabilities to take over the smooth takeover of to ensure smooth takeover of TCT. And also, after the taking over of the government, the toll will be the same for the use of the tunnel. The three cross-harbor tunnels, namely the CHT, the EHC, and the WHC, and the three land tunnels between Kowloon and Sha Tin, that is TCT, the Line Rock Tunnel, and also the Eagle's Nest Tunnel and Sha Tin Heights Tunnel, the usage level will not be affected. We will taking the entire situation into account concerning the six tunnels, including the TCT, and we will be looking at the tolls and also the traffic along these tunnels, and the toll adjustment proposals will be taken to the LegCo transport panel for consideration. We will continue to monitor the TCT traffic situation, and where necessary, we will place appropriate traffic management measures into place, and will liaise closely with the existing franchisee and the future contractor to ensure that the tunnel will continue its smooth and efficient operation throughout the transition. Thank you very much. And there are a few members who have indicated that they would want to speak. That's Chang Chung-tai, Mok Nai Kwong, Yu Si Wing. 3 minutes each, starting from Luk Chung-hung. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe a lot of people in Hong Kong, in particular drivers, even for public transport users, they're most concerned about tunnel tolls. The three tunnels, the Lion Rock is $8. The Eagle's Nest Tunnel is also $8, and this is $15 at Tate Can, which is the highest in terms of tolls. I think it would be better if it's all $8 because with so many years, the government would have recuperated all construction fees, and the government should not really look at recuperation of ongoing operation costs because it is, after all, a public service, and this should benefit the people of Hong Kong. Now, if the tunnel is to lower its toll, my question is whether there is a mechanism for lowering of fees for buses, minibuses, so that there will be a pass-on of the benefits to the passengers. And another point, my party is concerned about the frontline workers of this tunnel. I know that some of the staff have over 20 years of service, and their service includes remuneration, welfare, and holidays, etc. And my question is whether there is a mechanism for direct employment by the government or contractor employment relationship. My question is for these frontline workers after the takeover by the government, that their remuneration and welfare would not be reduced compared to before. Now, this is very important because after the takeover by the government, it cannot be a situation that's worse off than before. It will not do. Thank you. Mr. Yao, Mr. Chair, I would like to answer the first question, and the Transport Department will respond on the third question. Now, concerning the toll of the 6 tunnels, we are looking at the toll levels and its impact on traffic. And I heard that Mr. Look mentioned that across the board $8 toll level would be good. Now, the difference that we see today, it is because TCT is a BOT project and the operator will need to have sufficient profits to sustain its operation. The other 2 are government tunnels. After the takeover by the government, of course, it will be different, but still we have to consider how it will impact the traffic, especially for the Cross Harbour Tunnel. As for the second question, very quickly, for buses, because the toll from buses is a small part of the total operating revenue of the tunnel, even if there were any reduction in tolls, it would not really influence or impact the passengers' bus fee much, because the the toll as a part of the operation cost is such a low percentage, so the impact there will not be large. Transport Department, Ms. Yu. Thank you, Chair. Well, concerning maintenance and operation of the contractor and their treatment of frontline staff, this is a matter of concern. We are preparing the tender document, and at present we cannot disclose the content of the tender document, but we do encourage and we will include a point in the tendering document concerning appropriate compensation for the staff of the existing TCT in terms including welfare and remuneration, etc. Mr. Chair, I also believe that the toll should be lowered to benefit the people of Hong Kong and to allow passengers to have a better choice. Now, as mentioned earlier, the bus as a part of revenue is not a big part of the tunnel. But if we look at the other tunnels, we see that the bus fee range from $15 to $170, and it's 10 passengers in order to make up for that kind of fee. So I'm also in agreement to setting a same level for the tolls. Now, and another point concerning the Tit Khan Tunnel. It was not designed to accommodate so many buses. I see 10 to 15 buses going to the same station at the same time. And a lot of buses actually do go through the TCT because Kwun Tong and Tung Chung are very busy areas. And with all those buses trying to get close to the station, given that, I think you should extend the parking area for buses so that the buses can have a speedy loading and offloading. And much of the congestion now is because of these buses waiting for their turn to stop at the bus stations. So if we can extend the bus parking area, that would be good. Now, Mr. Lau's 2 points. One, concerning the bus fees, that it be the same across the tunnels. That's the same point as Mr. Look. We will consider that. The second issue, concerning after taking back from the tunnel, whether we can extend the parking space. We will ask the Transport Department to look into this to see the need and the feasibility. Can the Transport Department please respond?
Thank you, Chair. We'll look at the actual situation and review the utilization rate of buses and how they stop at bus stops to see whether improvements are possible. Yes, please take a look. If necessary, I can conduct site visits with you during the peak hours. I think the length of bus stops, it's not in keeping with the demand of present times. In Kwun Tong, in Eastern District, they are now new business centers. It is necessary to improve the design of bus stops in these districts. Thank you, Mr. Cheng Chung Tai. Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to clarify something first. With regard to tunnels going from NT to Kowloon, after Tit Khan Tunnel is also taken over by government, all 3 tunnels would belong to the government. But for cross-harbour tunnels, Western Harbour Tunnel will have its franchise up to 2023. In other words, amongst the 6 tunnels, when Tit Khan is taken back in 2018, only Western Harbour Crossing will be the one remaining. No, there will be Tai Lam Tunnel. No, I'm only talking about Cross Harbour and NT tunnels going into the urban area. In other words, when the Bureau looks at the traffic flow in tunnels going from the NT to the urban area, you should also look at the Western Harbour Crossing, because the franchise is still owned by a company. Will that have an impact on your survey of the toll levels? Undersecretary. Chairman, I think Mr. Chang's understanding is correct. In 2018, we talked about 6 tunnels. 5 would be government tunnels, but Western Harbour Crossing will remain a BOT tunnel. And according to the law, the company can set the tolls. When we consider reasonable distribution of traffic amongst the 6 tunnels, we definitely have to consider the toll levels of the WHC. By 2023, all tunnels will be reverted to government, and we can wait to make a decision until then. But there's something we can do in the interim. We proposed here at the Council before that perhaps we could have discussions with the WHC operator. We may have to seek the agreement of that operator if we want to adjust the tolls in any way. And if this is beneficial for streaming of traffic, then before the franchise of WHC is over, we may have to discuss all these with the operator. Well, Chairman, if the trend is for the government to take back all 6 tunnels, I believe both pro-establishment and pro-democratic members would agree that you should lessen the burden on the public. And secondly, I'd like to add one point to your survey. Lion Rock's tunnel is very congested and Taste Khan is also congested, but you have underestimated the situation. You have the Shui-chun-o estate. You have to look at traffic flow, which has much increased in these 2 tunnels. Yes, understood. Dr. K.K. Kwok. The government took back Eastern Harbour Crossing and yet there was no reduction of toll, so people were disappointed. You said you would try to lower the toll, but you seemed to have forgotten it. And this time around, I believe there is a chance for you to do that, because apart from private cars, all the other tolls charged here at TCT are higher than those in the other 2 tunnels, and this is not fair to the commercial vehicles. In your paper, you only focused on cross-harbour tunnels. How can you overlook the Eastern NT, where people use TCT to go to Sampo Kong, Out of Kok and other places in Kowloon East? Now that there is a differential in toll, commercial vehicles have chosen Lion Rock's tunnel because it's much cheaper there. You have, there's no reason for you not to do anything. You did not you want to do something about TCT. If later on the toll would be aligned with other government tunnels, how would the impact on your revenue be? Why are you unwilling to do it? Sorry, I don't really understand the second part of the question, but I can address the first part of the question. When we took over EHC, we accounted here at the council that since we need to do a detailed survey of the streaming of traffic amongst the 3 cross-harbour tunnels, so we chose to stay put when we took back EHC, because if you do something about one, definitely you are going to affect the traffic flow in the other 2. And then at a later stage, I also accounted that the 3 tunnels going from Kowloon to Sha Tin would also be impacted upon by the cross-harbour tunnels. Well, Mr. Undersecretary, the Lion Rock's tunnels usage rate is 1, but Taste Khan tunnel 0.8 only, meaning it is not a saturation point. Why can't you direct traffic to TCT by adjusting the tolls? Since Taste Khan links up with the EHC, if you direct cars to TCT, they would probably also use the EHC. But it's for motorists to choose. Well, no. Here, there will be an impact overall. We need to wait for the study report to be completed. It's not that far away. There will be an option proposed at the next year's LegCo session. And by then, we'll be able to have an overall consideration of the streaming of traffic amongst the 6 tunnels, because this is not going to affect one tunnel, but the overall situation. Can you give me figures? And how much less would you receive if there is an adjustment in toll? Dr. K.K. Kwok, can you be brief? I just want some figures. Sorry, which figure are you talking about? The cost of running the tunnel would remain stable, but I'm talking about the operating cost of TCT. The operating account. Are you talking about the future situation or the present one? You have reduced it from $15 to $8. So there is a toll differential. Do you have the figure? Are you aware of the question? Well, perhaps you can take it up with Dr. K.K. Kwok after the meeting. Mr. Charles Mok. Chairman. Members are quite concerned about the toll to be charged after the takeover of TCT. Well, in the past, I could see that members were quite subjective, saying that all the toll should be the same, or there should be toll-free for all tunnels, or this one should increase and the other one should see a reduction. I don't think all that is too scientific. I actually am inclined to what the government is doing. In other words, that you take stock of all the cross-harbor tunnels and the tunnels going to Sha Tin. You said you would give it comprehensive consideration, you would look at traffic flow, etc. But my concern is how you're going to deal with the data and how you would do your calculations in that study report. If you can't do it now, please supplement the information. What is the timetable of the consultancy? Who is the consultant? And can you let me know what methodology they are going to use? This is important because I want to know whether analyses will be done for different times of the day, the different scenarios that you expect to see, and also whether you make use of economic models to do your projection. Say if there are different scenarios about toll adjustments at the different tunnels, how would that affect traffic flow? And by way of traffic flow, would you also look at different types of vehicles which may react differently to different toll levels? That would be the scientific way to do it. In your consultancy, are you going to do this? What methodology would be adopted, please? Can I defer to the TD, please? Mr. Chris Chan. In January, we started the study report. The consultant is now collecting information at site. It is also gauging the traffic situation around the tunnels and the distribution of different vehicle types. And the consultant is now analyzing the data. We hope that in the next legislative session, we can come back with a concrete proposal to the panel for consulting members. Did you hear the question? You are not answering it. Maybe you should go back and dig up the information for me. You said you started in January and you must have gauged the traffic flow at different times of the day, but what about the types of vehicles, and would there be economic modeling to look at the reaction of different vehicle types brought about by toll adjustments? And if there is a reaction, where will those cars go? Will they choose another tunnel? Or will you just measure the traffic flow and that's it? Because that would not be useful. Mr. Chan, what the member mentioned would generally be included. We would be looking into different toll levels and toll levels for the different types of vehicles, and then we would integrate the different proposals for members' consideration. Mr. Yu Si-wing, Chairman, after the franchise is over, the administration is going to tender for an operator. Would there be standard clauses in that operator's agreement? Do you only go for the lowest bid, or is it that in the paper you say you would stipulate that original staff should best be retained? Now, is it that they should come up with a proposal, so you would assess the proposals? As you know, TCT has been with us for over 20 years. The facilities, the signage, ventilation, etc. Are you going to include those in the agreement or contract so that you can also put a mark on that? Under Secretary, I can give a general reply first and the TD can add. As for the management contract, of course we are not going for the lowest bid, we would be looking at other factors the TD can explain. But as to the present conditions in the tunnel, before the takeover, government departments will be making an inspection to make sure that the present operator does comply with the requirements. We will do the inspection first before we take over the tunnel. Perhaps the TD can supplement. Ms. Lee, in that contract, there will be two parts: quality of service and then tender price. In our tendering document, we will list the responsibilities of the operator during the contract period. That is, when managing and operating the tunnel, there are duties including collecting toll, managing the traffic, and also managing emergencies. And also it has to operate the electronic system and EMS system within the tunnel. And also there should be non-structural maintenance and repair done within the tunnel. So when people submit a bid, they would have to comment on these aspects and propose arrangements so we can do the assessment. Chairman, I asked one question, and that is to retain existing employees as far as practicable. Do they have to give a proposal on this as well? And also, what about measures to improve the management of the tunnel? Would that be part of the scoring system?
Yes, indeed. In terms of retaining the existing staff as a priority, indeed, they will have to give us a plan for so doing, and also there will have to be a comprehensive plan concerning the maintenance, etc., as I've mentioned, so that we do a comprehensive evaluation. Mr. Chair, in the paper, it says that there will be priority consideration for retention of existing staff after the takeover by the government. I have this as a case study. Let's see what the administration thinks of this. And I know this person whom I've known for a number of years, and he served on TCT for 20 years. He's now seriously ill in hospital, and he has his position kept for him, but he's not receiving any pay, and he'll have to continue to receive treatment. I hope by the 11th of July 2018, this person hopefully would be able to return to his work position. But I'm worried about this case, and that is a new operator may be able to see that there was a year or so that this person was ill and there was a major surgery and he was not able to report to work during that time. I worry that the new operator, if you have no requirement of bringing the entire staff en masse to the new operator, I fear for this person. Are there any measures from the administration, please? Stella? Mr. Chair, in our tendering document, we will request that the new operator will, as a priority, retain and employ the maintenance and frontline staff, including the technical staff of the existing tunnel. But of course, the staff, whether he is in this list that we have come up with, then the new operator will have to follow the requirement. Well, this person had served on the TCT for 20 years, maybe even 30 years. He and his family are very worried about his illness, and at the present he still holds the position. He's still a member of staff of the TCT management company. I'm just wondering, for the new operator, will the new operator use this as a reason, that his illness as a reason for not taking him on board as staff, or whether they will concern that is, the new operator will be concerned that the illness may recur and therefore not take him on board. As I heard you saying that, yes, there is a requirement in the tendering document that the staff should be given, the existing staff should be given priority. But in this very unfortunate situation, are there scenarios where the new operator will not take on the person concerned? Stella. As mentioned, the new operator will have to follow the terms of our contract. As for individual cases where appropriate, we, the department, would also intervene. So you're saying that there is a mechanism for intervention from the department? I'm not saying there's a mechanism as such, but where appropriate. First of all, the staff member concerned will have to fulfill the requirement, and if there are situations, we may intervene as appropriate. Mr. Chan? Now, there is this proposal, and that is lowering of toll first before study. My question is, Charles Mok mentioned just now that it has to be scientific. There has to be data. It's not just about any request for lowering of tolls across the board, as always, as members always do raise that kind of request. But we know that the people of Hong Kong want there to be a lowering of tolls at TCT. Of course, I raise this as a proposal and a motion. I'm sure the government would not just follow our views and just come up with the same toll level for all tunnels. But I want the government to commit to the following, and that is that the government considers lowering of tolls as a matter of principle. Of course, you can lower the tolls of a tunnel to attract more traffic and divert traffic from another tunnel, but of course the government can raise the tolls for the other two tunnels and achieve that diverting effect. And what I'm saying is that by adding tolls, it also can achieve the purpose of diverting busy traffic from the other tunnels. Now, you mentioned just now, the Secretary, that the bus fees will not be lowered significantly right away, but even 10 cents of lowering of bus fees would still be something, and it will set a trend. And I'm looking at the 1 year revenue, operating revenue. It is 400 million. After tax, it's 200 million Hong Kong dollars. And after dividend, it's $50 million. And so so the rest of it is what? Pocketable by the government? But the government is not here to make money operating the tunnels, but to serve the people of Hong Kong. So what does the government do with the profits? Put it into the treasury or what? Mr. Yao? Of course, Mr. Chair, I understand the concern of the members, and the people of Hong Kong, of course, want to see all fees lowered. I can understand that. But in conducting this study, it is to achieve a transport objective. It is not for increasing the revenue of the government or to add to the coffers. No, it is really through a scientific study. We want to adjust the 6 tunnels traffic flow so that the people of Hong Kong, when using the tunnels, will have a more reasonable time of passing through these tunnels, rationalizing the time used for transport. And we will have different scenarios for your consideration. If you are in support of certain scenarios or proposals, rather, we can implement them. And we don't have to wait too long for that. Mr. Yao, Chan Chi-chen was saying what the government he was asking what the government does with the surplus. Will you put it into the treasury? Well, actually, for any revenues, it would go into the general revenues of the government. For the Line Rock Tunnel, it is quite congested at this point, and the toll is relatively low compared to the other tunnels. for Line Rock Tunnel. I do not exclude what Mr. Chan was talking about. Indeed, for some of the tunnels which are charging particularly low tolls, indeed it is true they attract a lot of traffic to them. Now, we will be putting this to the vote later on. We have 14 members right here, and please keep to your seats. Mr. Lau Kwok-fan, now, I very much agree that the government has to be scientific in your studies, but what is not scientific is the studies done by the government. In 2003, the government did some diversion of traffic studies, and in 2005, there were different proposals as well, but there was no implementation. And in 2008, the government spent 7 million concerning, again, the same topic, diverting traffic among the 3 tunnels, but again, the findings were not implemented by the government. So it seems that you have done the studies, but you do not implement the recommendations of the studies in the end. So how scientific can it be for universal retirement provision? Again, you've done the study and you have not adopted it. So you can do the studies and not adopt the recommendations. That's the government's stance. Now, for the tunnel, it is 78,000 in terms of design capacity, so there is still a lot of excess capacity. And in the past concession period, there had been 8 times of revision upwards of tolls. It is because the operation results were not as ideal. Is it because the operator had not been profitable, and that's why you raise the tolls for 8 times? I mean, what about TCT after? How would it impact the traffic flow in Line Rock Tunnel and the other tunnels? My question is, why do you not have to do a study when you raise the tolls, but you have to do a study when you reduce the toll? And also, after you've done a study, would you follow the study's recommendation? Mr. Chair, for the Chek Lap Tunnel, from now till the resumption in 2018, it had been operating under BOT model, and the management company operates the tunnel, and there is a procedure for LegCo approval before there can be any raising of tolls. But the administration can object to any proposal for toll increase. Well, Mr. Chair, the BOT contract actually has very clearly set out the arrangement and the background for so doing. Indeed, we need an objective basis to support any diversion of traffic or transport stream. Now, it is true that in the past, the government had raised proposals to the LegCo concerning diversion of traffic or streaming of traffic. Mr. Chair, I'm asking why there need not be any study for increase of tolls. Mr. Yao, continue. Well, the LegCo, there had been very diverse opinions in the past. For example, for the Central Cross Harbour Tunnel, for East Tunnel, the LegCo had reservations concerning revision of the tolls, and also for at the district level as well. They fear that the traffic is not sustainable, the volume is not sustainable in their district. So the government had not forcibly went on with the proposal. But when it comes to 2018, there are 2 tunnels belonging to the government, and there are 3 tunnels leading to Sha Tin under the management of the government. We believe it is time for there to be a comprehensive study and resetting of the tolls. The time is ripe. Mr. Chair, he's not answered my question. Well, your time has exceeded. Ms. Regina Ip, please. Mr. Chair, we have a new operator. Will the government require them to use more technical means? For example, we have auto tolls at the tunnels, but it's not available to motorcycles. I've asked the secretary, and he said that there are collection booth arrangements which are not in place yet, and therefore it's not done. But will there be requirement for more electronic means of collection, for instance? And also, will there be big data to be gleaned from the tunnels, for example, what type of vehicles are using the tunnels, etc.? I think Hong Kong should be more advanced in terms of data collection and usage. So it's not just about being cheap in terms of the tolls, but in embracing new technology. Can we perhaps do some more? Well, Mr. Chair, concerning Tates Khan tunnel contract and arrangement, the Transport Department can respond on that. But before that, in the second half of the year, the people of Hong Kong, apart from using cash to pay for the toll and auto toll, they can also use cards, payment cards, to pay for the toll. Not for motorcycles, though. The Transport Department can supplement on that. This swiping of payment cards is available for payment of tolls. For electronic means, and that is, instead of having to put in collection tolls, the government is studying exactly this. From Lam Tin to Cheung Kwan O, there are no toll collection booths as such. And at the District Council, we have also explained the following, and that is we are considering electronic collection means to take the place of toll collection booths. Transport Department, whom? And Transport Department, please, will respond to this question. Stella. Concerning the collection at the TCT, there are 5 lanes at the collection booth that is available for auto toll payment. And we will. What year are you saying? In 2021, we will be putting in electronic payment as a means of payment.
After takeover, we have to renew the booths so that we can provide another channel of toll collection. 2021 is too late. Mr. Michael Tian. Chairman. Tunnel toll is about traffic diversion, but is also a political issue. In my view, tunnel tolls should not be pegged to cost effectiveness. It will not be meaningful. But I would be all for diversion of traffic. These tolls must be able to do 2 things. 1, diversion of traffic amongst the tunnels, and 2, it must be a balance against road traffic, because vehicle traveling speed has been on the decrease over the last 10 years. And if you charge very high tolls, roads would be very much congested. But of course, there will be other voices against that as well. Therefore, the average toll should be set according to history and the overall ecology. You have to be mindful about the road situations. You need to look at how our cars are faring on roads before you set the tolls. And of course, if you want to target the private cars, you perhaps want to do it in such a way people would be encouraged to take public transport. As for TCT here, I would support that you wait and see when you have overall data for all 6 tunnels. As you know, politically, if you are going to increase the toll for any one tunnel, there will be a lot of objection. And you should not be doing anything to adjust the TCT tolls now. If you ask us to wait for 1 year, and then when we have the data for all 6 tunnels, I would be happy to wait. But then WCH would be taken over in 2023. But then, say next year, the year after next, there will be these 6 figures. And if you have not taken over WHC yet, you will not be able to do anything about the other 5 tunnels. So are you really telling us or implying that we need to wait till 2023 before we can rationalize the tolls at TCT. I think there is some kind of contradiction here. Undersecretary, we understand where Mr. Tien is coming from. I think he has good sense. As for TCT tolls, we will be looking into all 6 tunnels, and of course, we'll also be making proposals for WHC. And then we'll have to negotiate with the WHC operator, which can agree or disagree. Okay, we understand. In other words, when the review report is out next year, if you want to do something, then perhaps you can consider subsidizing WHC. Well, that is one option. Good for making that clear, because I don't want to wait until 2023. According to FC information, the Lion Rock Tunnel throughput in peak hours is 5,100, non-peak 3,400, and then TCT and Eagle's Nest is about 4,000 at peak hours, and then 1,800 or 1,900 at non-peak hours. You can see Lion Rock Tunnel is having a very high load of traffic. If we can take over TCT, and if there can be some toll adjustments, we'll be able to stream traffic effectively away from Lion Rock Tunnel, especially during non-peak hours. Just now I was surprised by what the Undersecretary said. He said after taking over the tunnel, it is not necessarily true that we must lower the toll. We can even increase the toll. Well, if you are really going to do that to TCT, I'm sure more people will use Eagle's Nest. And at Newtown Plaza, there is already a bottleneck. It is heavily congested in peak hours. I hope after you take over TCT, you will not increase the tolls in other tunnels, because by doing so, you will only make traffic more congested when it goes from NT to the urban area. And I would criticize the administration. You say you have to take back all 6 tunnels before you would do the study. That is not fair, because not every NT resident wants to cross the harbor. They may go to Kowloon East or Kowloon West, and there are commercial vehicles which don't necessarily cross the harbor. If you want to combine everything together and wait for WHC is taken back, that is not fair. I would expect you to standardize the tolls of the 3 anti-tunnels after you take over TCT. That would be the best way to do it. Because this is a BOT tunnel, and after operation, you would have recovered all the cost. Then why do you still want to charge such a high toll? Undersecretary, let me clarify something, Mr. Chan. I think in the paper we stated clearly that we are not going to wait till WHC is reverted to government. That is not what we say. We say very clearly, and we promised that in the next legislative year, we'll be able to come back with a proposal about the 6 tunnels and their tolls, including the WHC. We can see that the 6 tunnels are intertwined or interlinked. That is why we want to deal with them as a batch, but we are not waiting till 2023. Mr. Poon Siu-ping. Thank you, Chair. TCT would be reverted to government in 2018, and you are telling us that the TD is preparing tendering documents, and hopefully by the end of 2017, you'll be able to award the contract to a new operator. I am concerned about a few matters. At the time of EHC, we asked whether existing employees can continue their work. You say that in the contract or tendering document, you would ask the new operator to retain as far as practicable existing staff. Let's get more information. There a requirement in the tendering document that existing employees would receive the same benefits. As operators, they of course want to make a profit. Given the present TCT toll levels, traffic flow has increased even after the last hiking of toll. When you design your tendering document, what would be the requirement on the new operator in this regard? The TD, please. Thank you, Chair. We'll remind potential bidders in the tendering document that they have to carefully assess the operating budget for the contract period, including remuneration for staff and possible adjustments during the contract period. As for staff benefits, we will look at that as part of the scoring system. The government is the biggest employer, but you are only passing the management responsibility to the contractor. I'd like to ask whether there can be a clause in the contract providing for standard working hours and also overtime pay. Is that possible? Undersecretary. TD. Mr. Lee. There will not be a particular clause stipulating the working hours for each member of staff. Well, that is not in the law yet, but in the tendering document, we will let the bidders know the shift hours at present for their reference. Next one, Mr. Wu Chi-wai. Thank you, Chair. The government is going to take over TCT. We understand that you are going to award a service contract for the tunnel to be operated and managed. But I think we are more concerned about the toll levels and the synergy amongst the tunnels. The paper says that the administration will consider how the few tunnels will be most effectively used, especially carrying people from NT to Kowloon. What is the timetable and the arrangement, please? Chairman, Mr. Wu, just now we answered that question, but I would say again here that in 2017-18, that is in the next legislative year, we will finish the diversion study of the tunnels and we'll come back to the panel here to report to members the situation and our proposals. That is the timetable. In other words, we'll know the toll arrangements, the diversion arrangements of the 3 tunnels, and we may have to amend different ordinances. Is that right? Well, no, we may not have to do that all at one go, but we'll definitely come back to tell you the study results and the proposal. Generally, we'll consult members first before we embark on legislative amendments. Well, the new diversion arrangements and the legislative amendment proposals definitely have to be done before the BOT is finished. In other words, when you take over, there must be a law to tackle a new toll level. Well, the timetable is like this. TCT's franchise will end in July next year. And then in 2017-18, we're going to complete the study. And our estimate is that we may not be able to complete the study report before the franchise expires. Our proposal, therefore, is that the toll levels for TCT will be preserved at the time of takeover. But if Council has a different view, then we can tackle it legislatively and we can combine the tunnels in that exercise. Well, Chairman, we are talking about another year, and you should set a deadline for yourselves, meaning before you take back the tunnel, you should be able to come back to council to make legislation for diversion of traffic, or else we will not be able to know when that can be done. Well, Chairman, our thinking is that we would put forward a proposal for council to discuss in 2017-18 and will allow members ample time for discussion. But the thing is, when council can endorse legislation to effect a toll adjustment, well, that is not something we can control. That is up to members. But when will you table the necessary legislative amendments? Well, as I said, Chairman, within 2017-18, the 6-tunnel diversion proposal will be reported to the panel for discussion, and we would hope to forge a general consensus before we have the basis for legislation. On this agenda item, I have received one motion. We have a quorum. Mr. Michael Look and Mr. Edward Lau are seeking to move a motion. It is also projected on the screen. It has also been copied to members. Mr. Look, can I ask you to read out your motion? Thank you, Chair. The motion is about legislative amendments with regard to the government taking over the ownership of TCT. In view of the fact that the government will take over TCT on the 11th of July 2018, this council urged the administration to effect a toll adjustment right after the takeover so that the toll level would be aligned. Mr. Wuchi, why we lack a quorum? That it should be packed at the same level together with tolls for Lai Rock Tunnel and Eagle's Nest and also Sha Tin Height until the completion of the study of the 6 tunnels so that we can effect a diversion of traffic. Okay, on this motion, anyone supporting it? Those in favor, hands up, please.
Do we have to take down the names? I think it's 8. Mr. Lau Kwok-fan, are you for the motion? Yes. Then 8. All those in objection, please raise your hand. 2. Abstentions? 2. 3. The motion is passed. Next, we will go to parking policy. I would like to discuss with you. Yes, you can raise your hand now if you want to speak. I would want to discuss with you, members. I know you're all very concerned about parking policy, this item. It is now this meeting goes on until 12:45. Now, all the chairmen of the district councils are here today to meet with LegCo members, and I know many of you will be at that meeting, and I do not want this very important item to be given too short a time for discussion. And Mr. Lau and Mr. All did say before the meeting to me that they want a public hearing. I give you a choice, members. First of all, that you be each given 4 minutes, and that will certainly be insufficient time, but I cannot extend the meeting any further. We have to end at 12:45. And I'm trying to say that we'll have a special meeting. For those in the queue, they will be able to speak at the continuation meeting, and then we'll also have a public hearing as well. Otherwise, we do not go into this item at all. We'll have a special meeting to discuss this. Second choice, yes, that is to say we do not discuss this item here, but we have a special meeting exactly just for this topic. The first choice is to allow each member 4 minutes, and those in the queue not able to speak in this meeting will speak at the next meeting. And there will be a public hearing as well. So let's put this to the vote. The first choice, please, all those in favor. And the second choice is not to discuss this item today. Now, as you have heard, all those in favor of the first choice, that is a majority. All right. In that case, we'll ask the administration to come into the room.
Motion 下一次都可以收嘅嚇。
Motions, yes. You can propose motions in the next meeting. Yes, and we'll handle the motion in the next meeting. I've collected a motion from Mr. Lau. All right, the order. Lau Kwok-fan, All Cheung-sing, Liu Chi-sing, Charles Mo, Chen Chi-chun, Lau Yip-kwang, Tuen Mun, Ho Yik-chi-ming, Chen Chen-ying, James Tin, Ho Kwat-yen, Wan Siu-kin, Luk Chiu-hung. All right, 4 minutes each. Some will be at the front of the queue, and those at the back of the queue will have to raise your question at the next meeting. So, Michael Tien, not James Tien. Michael Tien, you're number 10 in position. All right, sorry. Yes, the administration is here. Yes, will you please bring us through the paper? Mr. Chair, I've heard the decision just now. Mr. Chair, I'm here today to talk about the parking policy for the government and also some of the measures for meeting with the problem of insufficient car park spaces. As I've mentioned many times, we will give priority to commercial vehicles' need for parking. And this is because goods vehicles in their everyday operation, they need parking spaces for logistics industry and tourism, etc. They are very important pillars of the economy of Hong Kong. As for private cars, we've always encouraged people of Hong Kong to use public transport to lower the needs for private cars. Some 90% of passenger times, that is 12 million passenger times, are using public transport, and this is number 1 in the world. And we are continually increasing the capacity and the quality of service of public transport, including point-to-point transport service. Now, the vehicle fleet had been increasing in Hong Kong in recent years, and therefore in the past 10 years, the road speed for Hong Kong Island, Kowloon and New Territories had been lowering. But on the other hand, for Singapore and for Tokyo in Japan, it is the same. We cannot continually increase on roads and also parking spaces. And at the same time, in order to lower environmental impact and also to be in considering the traffic, we have to lower the various reasons we have to lower the number of private cars. And we understand that the people of Hong Kong may have need for private cars, but on the other hand, we do not want to convert some of the people who have been using public transport to use private cars. And therefore, the government will not increase private car parks in the various districts. We hope that the people of Hong Kong would understand and given this prioritization. Now, that is the framework for our policy. Now let us talk about the supply and demand for car park spaces. There had been a 45% of increase of private car licenses, and there had been 58,000 of such vehicles. And in terms of parking spaces, as 1.13 spaces to 1.13 cars to 1 parking space. And also the car owners would want parking spaces near their living areas. And it is true that there is a very real need for parking spaces, and there is a shortfall of such parking spaces. But at the same time, while we increase the parking spaces, we also have to decrease private ownership of cars. Otherwise, traffic will only worsen. Now, for business cars in the past 10 years, it had been lowering since 2006 from the 77,000. It had decreased to 72,000 in 2016. And in the same period of time, the space had increased to 48,200. And that increase is lower than that for private cars. And the ratio for 2016 is 0.67 during the period. But different from the private cars, the business car because business vehicles may very often be maybe in use at night time and also in the mainland. And also, some of them may be parked in the brown land, but because of various reasons, including brown land development in the new territories, it is becoming more serious a problem, the lack of business vehicles parking areas. And now, in terms of our policy, the Transport Department is coming up with a number of immediate measures for increasing car parking spaces, including roadside and nighttime parking, and also for tourism buses and also trucks for increasing the spaces for the parking of these vehicles and also the alighting and boarding spaces for them. And we have added some 970 spaces for commercial vehicle use. If we have the support of the districts, I'm sure we'll be able to add more spaces for these vehicles and also to increase the spaces for boarding and alighting. And further, we will have a consultancy research report into the dual use of such vehicles. And there will be a deep analysis of long-term increase of parking spaces, including through different new development projects to increase parking spaces for tour buses and as well as lorries, and also to come up with multi-story car parks under the TD, and where necessary, we will be changing the the spaces for commercial vehicles parking and also boarding and alighting. And further, the alleviation of traffic report of the there are three solutions. One, controlling the private car numbers, and secondly, increasing to a suitable level the private car spaces, and also change the vehicle needs of the people. But any of such solutions will need the support of the public. To increase parking spaces would include flexible zoning of car parks to allow for more car parks in new development areas, to provide more car parks for the development's own need, and also for private development projects for underground car spaces. We will exclude them from the building within the building ratio, so that the developers will provide certain amount of public parking spaces, and also to open up more office space, public government office parking space for public parking, and also that there will be increase of private parking spaces in certain public buildings. Also, we want to change the people's use of the public's use of private cars. We understand that it is not easy for there to be enough provision of private car parks, and in particular for areas where there are insufficient car park spaces, the drivers, owners of private cars should consider using public transport so as to decrease the environmental impact as well as lowering the traffic in the areas. And we will be continually monitoring the situation and coming up with measures so that we will be providing the relevant policies, etc., for the different interest groups and the different stakeholders. And we welcome any views on this. Now, 4 minutes each. LAU Kwok-fan. Thank you, Chair. I can see that there are already certain measures from the government, but in actual implementation, I think it may not be as effective as envisaged. I see that the administration had proposed increasing of traffic fines, etc. And we have to consider, as you have mentioned, that while we consider the raising of traffic fines, we also have to control the number of private vehicles in use in Hong Kong. But I observe that private vehicles have still been on the increase, and there must be a reason for that. So you have to review the reason why private cars have been increasing to such tune. I'm sure the Secretary, you being responsible for your sector, it is not just a matter of traffic, but also for housing. A lot of the housing are built in the new territories now, private as well as public. And we all have to know that very often for people living in faraway areas, it is not convenient for them to use public housing. They will have to drive. And given that, how can there be a very good transport support for them? And also for park and ride. For new territories, perhaps it is true that you have to have this large-scale multi-story car parks so that for the new territories that there is sufficient diversion to the public transport through park and ride. The reason why it's not worked well, it is because we all know that public housing or housing is a very important topic for the community, but these short-term parking, it's only a short-term solution. We already know that there is these short-term parking sites which will soon be used for housing development. And the car parks, there is no measure to immediately find sites to locate these parking spaces in the multi-story car parks which have been demolished or done away with.
I hope you can still use STT to provide nighttime roadside parking. But in the future, more and more land would be used for housing construction. Therefore, my concern is about short-term parking numbers. There will not be any alleviation of the pressure. Rather, you are going to reduce parking spaces further. You are responsible for both transport and housing. Secretary, what can you say about that? Chairman, inevitably, parking spaces occupy land. And as Mr. Lau said, when we build housing or when we provide commercial buildings, and also there is the logistics industry, all need land, and we must balance the use of land. As I said in my opening remarks, we would first want to satisfy the parking demand of commercial vehicles. This is only something that we should do because they have a role in developing the economy. For private cars, the direction we are taking is not to encourage the public to rely on private cars. That is why we want to develop our public transport network. In the whole wide world, our utilization rate of the public network is high. Next month, when we come to the panel and we talk about the public transport strategic study, I will say more about how we can boost the capacity of the public network. Mr. Wilson Orr. Thank you, Chairman. About the parking policy and also measures to mitigate shortage of parking spaces, I can see that the administration is trying very hard. But then the impression you give to members and the public is that your work has not been effective. We, of course, understand we have limited land, and it is understandable that you give priority to commercial vehicles. But then the thing is, you are not even doing it for commercial vehicles. Say, for example, when you drive at night, you will see that heavy vehicles and commercial vehicles are parked on our roads. About your measures for commercial vehicles, do you think they are effective in tackling the parking demand of commercial vehicles? Our observation is that You are not doing it for commercial vehicles, and more private cars are licensed, so it's a deadlock. If you continue in your old ways, and you also say you're going to do a comprehensive consultancy on commercial cars, then I'm telling you the situation will only deteriorate in the coming 1-2 years. Chairman, I always say that to relieve this situation, we must tackle the problem at source. There is a growth of private car fleets, and there is also the problem of illegal parking. As you know, in Kowloon East, there is illegal parking on both trunk roads and small roads. Well, safety is one problem, and also in the small hours when they come back to take their vehicles for the day, it's also a nuisance to the public. So you have to think of ways to deal with it. And also the short-term tenancy car parks, they are now resumed one after another. And if people don't have anywhere to park the vehicles, they would park illegally. Do you do an assessment in the vicinity of those STT car parks before you resume the land? I want to say that you really have to come up with concrete measures to tackle the situation. Well, the Secretary said that faced with an ever-growing fleet, you are going to do an overall or comprehensive study of parking demand. I hope you will extend it to cover heavy vehicles, motorcycles, and private cars. Because even motorcycles have no parking space. And also, since you cancel the temporary car parks, let us look at Lei Yue Mun car park in Kwun Tong, and some in Kai Tak have been cancelled. Do you have policies and measures to provide temporary parking spaces to meet the demand? And last point, Chairman, I hope we can have a hearing, as you said you would. Thank you for taking our view on board. Secretary, I will make use of the time to talk about the major directions, and then the TD can comment what they do after cancelling temporary car parks and STTs. Look, short-term measures are for the short term only. They provide immediate solutions, and I hope that the upcoming consultancy study can better let us know the demand for parking by commercial vehicles. What we want to do is to satisfy the parking demand of commercial vehicles, but for private cars, it is not our policy to satisfy the parking demand, because we just cannot catch up with the growth of the fleet, and we will have to take measures to limit its growth. But of course, we'll also appropriately increase parking spaces for private cars. Next one, Yu Si-wing. Thank you, Chair. Annex 3 to the paper, please. This talks about coaches and non-franchise buses. There are over 7,500 yet, but there are only 5,100 parking spaces. In other words, a shortfall of over 2,000. The Secretary said some of them go to the mainland for parking, so the actual demand is not that high. But if they use mainland parking spaces, how many of such vehicles we are talking about? You have to know the number before you can assess the demand. Secondly, in the past 3 years, coaches have not increased much, only in the area of dozens. But then there is a reduction of 200 parking spaces. That is a big problem, isn't it? There is not a big growth in the number of coaches, but the parking spaces are decreasing. What is your policy of limiting the growth of the coach fleet? In fact, you are considering increasing the quota for coaches. Will there be a clearer direction for the increase of the number of coaches? The same goes for parking spaces. There is such a big shortfall now. What are you going to do to increase parking spaces for coaches in the next 5 to 10 years? Can I ask the TD to answer the question? How are we dealing with the shortfalls? Commissioner. Chairman, there are about 1,100 cross-boundary coaches which ferry passengers across the boundary. Now, how many of them park on the mainland at night? We don't know. In 2011, we did a survey on lorries, and we saw that there is a 5% of the fleet that park on the mainland and some others on brownfield sites in the NT. But as for increase in coaches in the PTSS, we can see that happening, and we'll come back next month to the panel to report to members. We can see that in the past 1-2 years, there has been a reduction in tourist numbers. So the utilization rate of coaches and non-franchised buses is on the decline. Therefore, we don't see a need to increase the number of parking spaces. We still maintain the requirement that if at the application time of a carrier or passenger carrier license, the applicant must purchase a serving non-franchise bus. What about supply of parking spaces? In the next 5-10 years, Chairman, as the Secretary said in his opening remarks, we'll try to identify nighttime parking spaces on the roads, and where appropriate, we can build car parking spaces, or actually car parks for heavy vehicles. One example is Area 67. In Cheng Kwan-o, we are going to build a government building there. There will be 100 heavy vehicle parking spaces. Coaches can park there as well. We'll continue to identify suitable sites to increase parking spaces. Mr. Charles Smock. Sometimes you need to drive. You can't always rely on the MTR. Something happened to the MTR going to Sha Tin. And let me talk about car parks. The administration is closing government car parks one by one, and I only discovered that the Murray Road car park building was closed last week. When I drive around and I need to park my car, you remember Middle Road car park was closed, and I had to go to the nearest car park, and I did that, and I could find a parking space. But I don't know what has happened after Murray Road car park building was closed. Do you have data for the last 2 weeks? Would people be going to Star Ferry, that is the City Hall car park, or is it now fully used? It may be better in Central because, frankly, you can park at Admiralty and you can walk to Central where there is a covered walkway. The distance is not long. The impact may not be huge, but have you got the assessment? Secondly, we don't know which car park is fully utilized and where we can find a car parking space in a nearby car park. I think that information is important. In the paper, you have this Hong Kong e-routing and data.gov.hk mobile application or website. But you are not including all the car parks in Hong Kong. You only include parking information of 50 car parks, including those managed by the TD. So the second question is, what measures can you take to encourage or require car parks to disseminate such information? And secondly, can you make public real-time information? Can you take the lead and make public the information of TD car parks so I can use a third-party app to know the information? At least you can play a leading role so other people will follow suit. Secretary, can I defer to the TD about Murray Road car park and how it has impacted upon other car parks? But let me say why we have to demolish the car park, it is because we need office buildings in Central urgently. That is why in 2014 in the policy address, we said we would rezone GIC sites into office use. Car parks information, Commissioner. Well, before we planned for the demolition of the Murray Road car park, we did an assessment in 2014-2015. At that time, we could see that within a radius of 300 meters of Murray Road car park, there are 5 public car parks, and their utilization rate is sufficient for receiving the offloaded vehicles from Murray Road car park. It was closed on the 1st of May, and we did a survey afterwards. During the peak hours, for Central and Admiralty, the peak hours mean 12 noon to 2 p.m., which is lunchtime. And we looked at the 5 public car parks. The one with the highest utilization rate was 98% and the lowest 85%. In other words, there's still capacity for motorists. As Mr. Mok said, these car parks are linked up with covered walkways. Secondly, parking space information. At Hong Kong e-routing app and the data.gov.Hong Kong portal, the information is quite public. Mr. Mok, are you saying that we should disseminate the information in another way, that is to allow apps developers to get the information? Well, first, you should encourage more car parks to take part, and secondly, whether TD car parks can make the public information so third-party apps developers can get the information. First, we always encourage car parks to be part of this. We have been writing to developers and car park operators. Well, they have different considerations, but this is an ongoing task. Secondly, making the information public. We understand software developers and apps developers would like to get the information in a certain way.
And we have been talking with GCIO colleagues to see how we can facilitate these providers in getting the information. We have no problems with that. In fact, we are quite open with the information, including for the Hong Kong e-routing. Now, after the car parks have been closed, can you provide the relevant data and your calculations, please? Well, Mr. Chair, we can provide the data. As for the calculations, it is pretty straightforward. Mr. Chan Chi-chin, Mr. Chair, we're dealing with insufficient car parks. There are 2 solutions. 1, increase the number of car parks. 2, reduce the number of vehicles. But however we reduce the number of vehicles or keep it constant, what we're looking at is insufficient car parks, and it's a very serious deficiency in the number of car parks. And it is impossible that the government can provide endless car parks, and if it makes it too easy, too convenient for parking, and the government is saying that that will encourage a lot of private ownership of cars. I think that is impossible. How can it ever be that the government would provide too many car parks and too easy parking? Well, I would want to see that there will be more private car parks and also roadside meter parking provided by the government will be made available for parking. And I'm sure it is not that difficult because roadside parking, they can be equipped with electronic meters, etc. Now, I also believe that there should be encouragement of people using public transport, and rather than to own their own cars or to reduce the usage of their privately owned cars. But of course, in terms of solution, of course, a number of solutions or measures should be put into place. Toll collection, well, we were talking about tunnel toll, just now we should increase that, gas tolls, etc., license fees, etc., and other measures such as busy times road toll collection, etc. Well, the heavier the measures, the more the measures, it will of course be more effective. It's like cessation of smoking. The more the measures, the more effective it will be. But for parking, how would it affect making it difficult to park? How would it affect the desire to own vehicles privately, or the desire to use these privately owned vehicles? I think you should take all those into account, that is toll fees, penalty tickets, and gas fees, etc. How all these measures, how would they impact the usage of private cars? Now, there is a mentioned in the documents. In Tokyo, it mentions that those who want to buy vehicles will have to prove that within 2 kilometers of where they live that there is parking space. I mean, what are you trying to achieve with that? Only the rich can own vehicles, because I will have to have the parking space before I can buy a vehicle. I mean, if you increase the tax for cigarettes incessantly to a very high level, then I would say just ban cigarettes altogether, because for this kind of extreme measures, I'm against it, really. So is it just for mentioning, for discussion, or is this really a way forward that you are considering, please? Thank you very much, Mr. Chan, for your sharing. Let us look at Hong Kong's experience and worldwide experience. It is true that we cannot continually increase car park spaces. We have to limit the number of cars and private vehicles or privately owned vehicles. It is not true that by providing less car parks, the number of cars will decrease. But really, we have to put in measures for lowering privately owned cars. In paragraph 32, we have mentioned a number of measures, such as the measures taken by Singapore, Beijing, and in Tokyo. It is mandatory that you have to have a certificate of availability of car parking space within 2 kilometers before there can be a purchase of private cars. And we, Hong Kong, of course, will have our measures, and the fixed penalty, of course, is one such measure in the midst. Now, Mr. Chair, it is mentioned that there are 4 different ways of providing more car parks for the public, but I think that it is insufficient, and the short-term parking sites have been taken back by the government, and through development and new redevelopment projects to provide car park spaces. I think this is only short-term, 3, 5, 7 years, and I think the supply of car parks would only fall in the near in the next few years rather than increase. Now, given that, what is the consideration? Should there be more multi-story car parks, as the short-term parking sites are taken away? Would this benefit more people of Hong Kong in seeking car park spaces? Mr. Chair, for the planning of land use in Hong Kong, it is inevitable that where there are some car parking space right now, but because of more urgent need of the land use, we have to relocate these car parks. And for the new building, the developer will have to, according to the planning requirements, provide for the own use of the development, and at the same time provide for some public car parking spaces. Now, for short-term ones, as mentioned, because in the short term, if the land site is not in use and because of demolition of certain buildings, perhaps this short-term car park site can be located elsewhere. This can be done. But really, we have to seriously consider whether in certain locations, because of supply and demand situation, we may have to consider building a new multi-story car parks. But on the other hand, we do require that for the new developments that there should be provision of public car park spaces. Mr. Tam? Well, it is true that we cannot allow for incessant increase of private vehicles. But before we have the relevant measures, at the same time we're seeing a lowering of car park spaces. That is a problem. Now, in paragraph 8 there, it says that you require developers to provide parking spaces for public use. Now, it says that there is already 345 such public car park spaces in this development. Now, you also mentioned that in the future there will be 417 such car park spaces. But before demolition, I'm talking about the middle road car park. I mean, all of a sudden there are 300 spaces less of car park spaces. And for Murray Road, you require only 102 with a huge reduction of car park spaces, over 300 of them. I mean, what will happen then? The cars will have to roam around the streets looking for car park spaces. Now, if you're talking about business or commercial vehicles, in Hong Lau Road, there is a nighttime parking area for commercial vehicles. I have put a film at nighttime, and I put it onto Facebook. And in fact, there are all these cages for recycling of materials, etc., all sorts of things piled up in these areas. So it is like providing no space for such parking. Now, for Hoi Yun Road, do you know what is charged for that car park site? 30 minutes, $25 for parking fee. That's 1 hour, $50 for 1 hour. This is the ticket. This is the receipt. This is in Kwun Tong, Mr. Secretary. Basically, there is no parking space there, and it is because of a number of reasons. It is an industrial area. There are, commercial vehicles which occupy the space, and by putting buckets and all sorts of things to save the space for themselves, that is a problem. And also, the police, when getting there, they say they cannot do anything because it is up to the FEHD. And as a result, lanes and car park spaces are occupied. And the public and the police is saying that for the towing away of cars, it is in the single-digit numbers. Now, that is because there is insufficient implementation and enforcement, and that is the root of the problem. For instance, for places which connects up to the flyover or the high-speed lanes, there are a lot of commercial vehicles or heavy vehicles parked there. I think you have to find some sites which will allow you to do this rather than to cancel all the car parks in the busy areas. And you must enforce the measures, tow away the cars. Some of the cars would think that they are just paying the fine for parking rights. Now, before providing more parking spaces, you increase the penalty fine by 50%. I'm not in support of that. You need a comprehensive plan before you can increase the penalty fines. Well, first of all, I agree that for occupation of spaces or so-called saving of parking spaces or parking anywhere that is a problem. Now, in Central, in fact, the police had stepped up with enforcement. There is more towing of cars now. I hope Mr. Tam and other members, hopefully you will not say that any penalty fines cannot be increased because there is insufficient car parking all around. This will certainly not help with the situation. Members, we have a few more minutes to the end of the meeting, and Mr. Chiu-hung has a matter raised under AOB. Now, according to our rules, you will have to raise that AOB item, and the item has to be related to the business of the meeting. I hope you will write in, and we will handle it at the next meeting as a matter to be discussed. Now we're close to the end of the meeting. There are 3 more motions which we will handle at the next meeting, and the Secretariat and I will look at the schedules and determine the date of the next meeting. Close of meeting now. Thank you.